thank you to the Women's Leadership Initiative and the Wellness Initiative at Albany Law School, both of whom have made this program possible this evening. We're going to be recording the program to make it available to people who were not able to join us this evening, and the recording will be available for 7 days. We'll send the link out tomorrow. So without further ado, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our facilitator this evening, Randi Braun. Randi Braun specializes in executive coaching. She's a consultant, speaker, and founder of Something Major. She has coached attorneys across big law, public interest, and government with an emphasis on optimization over remediation. Randi's corporate clients are leaders in their field, including Microsoft and the law firms of Cahill, Gordon, and Reindel, and Fried Frank, among others. Randi, I'm delighted to welcome you here tonight. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm delighted to be here. Can everyone hear me okay, I'm assuming? Wonderful. Well, I am, like Mary said, delighted to be here this evening. I want to thank you all so much. Special thanks to the Women's Leadership Initiative and the Wellness Initiative. I couldn't think of a more timely conversation than still quarantined, surviving or thriving remote on November 5th, 2020, as we are sitting without a president-elect on the precipice of finals if you're a student, at the end of a very work year if you're an alumni, and as our country has just reached over 100,000 coronavirus cases in a single day. I didn't come here to stress you out, but I'm really, really thankful to spend this time with you this evening on such a prescient topic. And with that, I'd like to just go ahead and quickly introduce myself. Again, Mary introduced me. I'm Randi Braun. I'm an executive coach and the founder of Something Major. As Mary mentioned, I don't exclusively work with lawyers, but I do spend quite a bit of time with them, which is why I am so delighted to be here. And I really spend my time working specifically with women, usually, around a few core things, whether they are working in big law firms, working in public interest, or some of my clients, like one I just spoke to this morning, who works here on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., where I'm speaking to you from tonight. And I help them do three things that we're all going to do together because they're so critical to really surviving and thriving in a COVID-19 remote world. The first is leveling up. And so whether that is an emerging leader who's stepping into their first big role, or someone who's thinking about partner track down the line, or a law student who's thinking about what leveling up could look like in taking advantage of their law school career, I'm really passionate about helping women think about what the small steps are they can take each and every single day to level up on their long-term goals. The second, and it's really at the heart of surviving and thriving in a remote world, is leading on purpose. Every single day, waking up and making intentional decisions about who we want to be at home, at work, and at school. And then lastly, I almost laugh when I say this now, navigate transition. This used to be thinking about what the arc might be from school to work. This used to be thinking about making a job move in the market or leveling up from an associate to a partner level. You know, never in a million years did I think that navigating transitions would mean navigating a global pandemic and a year just unlike we have seen before. So I think we can all agree that we are not in Kansas anymore. And while I don't have a crystal ball to tell you exactly how it's going to go, I do want to help you make a game plan to win, whatever winning means for you. And as we think about what winning can mean for some of the different folks who are here with us on the phone, I would love if you would start introducing yourself on the chat. And I'm just going to open it so that I can see it. If you would share with me tonight, you know, where are you joining us from in this crazy remote world? Maybe some of you are up in Albany. Maybe some of you are downstate in New York. I am, if you can't hear from my accent, I'm a native downstater who's lived in Washington, D.C. for about 10 years. I would love to hear what you're hoping to create by being here today. So please do start introducing yourself, and also let me know, are you a student? Are you a staff member? Are you an alum? So where you're joining, what you're hoping to create by being here today, and your student, alumni, or staff status. While we wait for those to come in, let's talk about what we're going to create here together. And today we're going to look at 3 core learning objectives. Number 1, so much of thriving while we're remote is all about mindset. So much of this is about mindset. And it's really hard to maintain a positive mindset or reclaim a positive mindset when something really stressful happens to us, especially these days. And so we're going to be looking at some specific frameworks that you can use when you're decision making in moments of stress and overwhelm. These can be decisions as small as I have too much to do than I can accomplish in the next 3 hours, and as big as my lease is ending next year. Do I even want to stay here? Or what am I doing with my life? Because many of us have learned a lot about ourselves in the pandemic, and that can create its own stress and overwhelm. Number 2, as we think about mindset, we're also going to shift to actual tools and tactics and talk about a few different tools that you can use every single day to beat the burnout and reclaim some of the time that feels so slippery and nebulous, to really, again, move that dial from surviving to thriving in this remote world. And then finally, because as an executive coach, I am a huge believer that a conversation is just a conversation until we pair it with action, I'm going to leave every one of you a blueprint tonight for designing your own individualized thriving while remote game plan. I want you to walk away with this tonight, knowing that this is in your hands moving forward. Any questions before we move forward? And I'm just going to peek at the chat while I wait for anyone to unmute themselves if they have one. So public interest attorney, class of '07 we have with us. We have someone from upstate New York graduating next month. Congrats. An Ithaca, New York alum, grad from 99. We have someone in Albany who's a 2L. Really, really nice diversity here, perspective. And thank you to those who were brave enough to share what it is you want to create. I love seeing creating better work-life balance as a 1L. Spoiler, it's hard no matter how you slice and dice it. I hope you walk away feeling like it's just a touch easier tonight. And lots of questions about decreasing stress, looking to get recharged. I don't think I missed anything. Thank you all for sharing that. I can't stress enough that this is a space that we're creating together. So I want to just walk through a few shared expectations that I have, and that I want to share and design with you so that we can make the most of this time. First and foremost, whether you're watching this in a few days on the recording or you're here with me tonight, this time is about you. This time is for you. If you're anything like me, you've been going back and forth from putting your phone on silent, not checking the news, to feeling like every single push alert is really urgent because I don't know about you, I want to know who our next president is, right? Many of you are studying for final exams. I just want to encourage you, you carve this time out tonight for yourself. So give yourself the permission to fully enjoy it. Outlines and study groups and email will all be there for you at 6:31, I promise. The second thing is that I want you to think of our time tonight as less of a prescription. I am not going to tell you, these are the 3 things every single one of you can do to thrive. It's really more of a buffet. We are going to talk about a lot of ideas, a lot of tools. It's actually my goal that you each walk away with 1, 2, or 3 things that are going to move the dial for you that are specific to you. I will know I did my job if each one of you walks away with something slightly different. To that end, I've been talking a lot, and I really want to get you all participating here. You're going to see, I'm going to be shouting out to hear from you in the chat. I'm going to be asking you to unmute. If any of you are brave enough to even turn on your camera, that would be awesome. You know, some of us aren't in the most camera-friendly locations. I was just saying to Mary before we started, this is not my office. I have 2 kids under 5, and this is just the quietest spot in the house right now. So if you showed up and you feel like you just want to be brave enough to turn on your video, I hope you'll do that. But I hope that you'll participate either by, you know, sharing with your voice or sharing in the chat. To really preserve a space where we can all participate, I'm also going to ask that we run this by Vegas-style rules, right? So what happens in this room stays in this room. We're going to be talking about things we struggle with. We're going to be talking about some things that are really personal in terms of how we feel stressed out. So I ask you to respect the space with each other by taking the learnings with you, but not necessarily repeating the stories that you hear here. And when we do get to Q&A at the end, I will ask that we pause the recording for just the last few seconds at the end so that if anyone wants to ask a question off the record, they have that space. And then lastly, this is something I'm so passionate about. I want us to have fun. Before I took my coaching and consulting and speaking business full time, I worked in business development, and I absolutely, positively loved it. Taking something major full time has been the best thing I ever did in my entire life because I get to have fun conversations with fun people every single day. And I hope that you'll leave here feeling like you had a little bit of fun too. Any questions or any thoughts before we go any further and start talking about some of these mindset tools? No? I know we had someone in the chat just post that they're actively job seeking and are a recent JD. Just a few other I want to introduce for those of you who might not be seeing the chat or might be watching this later. We have someone who's an alum from 05 and interested in navigating connections remotely, both in work and in life. We're going to talk about that. For the person who said that they're looking for job opportunities, that can be really, really draining. So you've come to the right place. So let's jump in, right? Let's talk about the new normal, new decisions, and new frameworks. Elephant in the room. Let's just acknowledge that this has been a really hard year. Can I just get like a +1 in the chat if you feel like this has been a hard year? Because we can't acknowledge enough that we're all adjusted, right? But many of us feel like sometimes that feeling of true north is not always super accessible, right? We know where we're going, we're at work, we're a student, we're navigating a job hunt, and yet there's something that can make us feel a little out of sorts, a little unmoored. Some days are harder than others, and a few of those in a row can feel really, really crushing. Whether you're studying for finals or you're just navigating life as a working professional, I think we can all agree like the stakes just feel really high right now. And I don't say this to get everyone amped up and to stress you out. I say it to just level with you because I'm assuming you came here tonight or you're taking the time to listen because you feel the same way. And I just want to normalize that 9 months in, however many months we're in later, if this feels hard, you are not doing it wrong. You're actually doing it right because you came here tonight to have a conversation about how you can do it better. So when we feel unmoored, it can make our life hard, right? It can make it feel hard to have boundaries. It can make it feel hard to trust our judgment and our own intuition. And like I said, if you're anything like me, there are just moments where finding that true north, it just feels a little bit more elusive than it did, you know, way back in January. So we're going to talk about how to find true north. And if there's anything I believe in as a coach, it's this. When we are seeking answers, one of the best things we can do is actually look to questions. And so we're going to look at 5 questions that you can use when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. The first is this: what can I control right now? Anybody have anything in their life that they feel like is firmly in their control? Tonight at 5:15 on November 5th. Carrie Ann says how I respond to the stress. I love Kelly's how I respond to the stupidness that gets presented to me. Plus one of you have felt that, right? Our fuses feel shorter. Absolutely. Other things that we can control: what we eat, who we talk to, the effort we put into things. Little things about how we're spending our time, and we're going to talk about some strategies to really help us feel empowered about that. It's so easy when so much is out of our control to latch on to the things that we can't control, and attach to those and run like hell at those, because those are what's creating a problem in our life. So I want to encourage you to think about how and where you can reframe in moments of overwhelm and stress, to really think about what you can control in this moment right now. Bonus points if it's something really, really, really small. I love that Laura just added before we get to question 2, small detail-oriented cleaning tasks. That's something that she can control. So number 2, what's important to me in this moment? It's so easy to think about what comes next. Maybe you're a student and you're preparing for finals. Maybe you're a working professional here tonight, and there's a lot on your plate or on your mind about what the end of the year is going to look like, or 2021 is going to look like. You will take so much control and power back in moments of stress and overwhelm by really thinking about what's important to you in this moment. Anyone brave enough in the chat to share something that's important to them, or that feels really important in their lives right now? I'll share just quickly, and feel free to chime in after. Some of the things that are really important to me in this moment right now on the phone with you, giving you my full attention. That's something that's important to me in this moment. That's how micro it is. Something that's important to me in this moment right now is honoring the time that I've spent here with you. I love Justin just said something that's important is walking his dog. I would add to that, Justin, sounds like you have fur babies. I have live babies. And, they're important to me too, right? Another thing that can be really grounding and reorienting for us is also, as much as zooming in can be helpful, really thinking about how we zoom out and just saying, in a moment of stress or overwhelm, how do I want to live my values here? So a value could be anything from family, connection, friendship, faith, fun, justice, respect. I'm sure each one of you has a set of core values that guides your life. And one of the things that we can do when we feel really unmoored is to take one of those core values. Let's say one of your core values is respect, and to actually ask yourself, how can I live my respect value right now? Maybe that's showing yourself a moment of respect. Maybe that's giving a client matter or a study matter, a level of respect and energy. And to do that, you need to step away and take a break, right? The next one is the one that I will tell you always resonates the most with me, because I don't know about you, but I'm really hard on myself. Anyone here, can I get like a +1 on the chat if you feel like you're harder on yourself than you are about anyone else in your life? Yes, I see a lot of +1s. And I had a question from Laura about what to do when values conflict with each other. Laura, I want to come back to that question in just a few minutes. And Mary or Lima, if you could help me come back to that question at the end of this section, I want to make sure that we don't lose it. And so really thinking about our lives haven't changed in terms of the work that we do. If you're an employee, you're still going to work. If you're a student, you're still going to school. But everything around us has changed. Our fuses might feel shorter. We might be having struggles in our personal life that weren't there. We might feel insecurity about things in our life. And I want to encourage you to really separate, where you're judging yourself today versus where you are judging yourself potentially with pre-COVID-19 metrics and expectations. Where can you give yourself grace? Where can you cut yourself a little bit of slack? Because when we start to jam the square peg of our COVID-19 life, jam the square peg of our old lives through the round hole of COVID-19, we run into trouble. How we're going to be most successful these days is reimagining what our life can look like, what joy can look like, what success can look like. The pressures of the world are still there, but the world is really different. And so I invite you to get curious about what could change for you in getting less judgmental, and perhaps what the cost is of being too judgmental with yourself right now. And then lastly, because we just can't do it all on a good day, we certainly can't do it all now, what can you deputize, delegate, or skip? Not because you are a slacker, but because saying no to something is often an opportunity to say yes to something else or do something else that's more important, better. So with that, we've looked at 5 different questions. Can I just get in the chat, which one of these is resonating most with you in this moment right now? See quite a bit of 4s. Am I judging myself? That question should be reframed as, where am I judging myself in a COVID-19 world by pre-COVID-19 metrics and expectations? What can I control? Lots of 5s. Can I deputize, delegate, or skip this? So what we're going to do, because I really do want to keep this interactive, because I really do want you all to leave with some tips, is Lima is going to put a link into the chat right now. And what we've prepared for you this evening is just a little bit of a reflection exercise for you. To just take a few minutes. We're going to really take some time, just about 10 minutes to do this, and just do some journaling and some reflecting about what's speaking to you about these questions right now. A couple of pro tips. If a question doesn't resonate with you, just move on to the next one. If you start at question 1 and question 1 is not resonating with you, forget it. Move on to the one that does. If a question feels really fruitful, stay there. You don't have to answer them all. Feel free to write in bullet points, to write in long form. If you can't think of anything, just keep typing over and over and over again. I'm going to keep writing. I'm going to keep writing. After about 30 to 60 seconds, something might come to you. Again, this time is for you. So I'm going to ask you to resist temptation to check social media, text messages, and emails. And we will come back together at 5:33. So in about 10 minutes, I'll cue you when about 5 minutes has gone on. And I'll cue you when we have about 1 minute left. And I will be here. So if you have any questions about the journaling exercise, throw them into the chat or unmute yourself. It's going to take about just 1 or 2 more minutes, just wrapping up. And if you're already done, unlike in a room where we're all together, I can watch you put your pens down. I can't watch that here. So if you're done, just throw a done in the chat, and that will help me. We'll be coming back together in just a moment, but that'll help me kind of read the room. Pardon me, read the Zoom. All right, looks like we have some pretty good quorum on being done, and we're just coming up on 10 minutes. Anyone feeling courageous to share something that came up for them in that moment of reflection? Feel free to unmute yourself. You can also throw it into the chat if you're feeling shy about participating.
I guess I can start off here. I'm still kind of stuck on the living your values question, because I find not only are there so many conflicting values sometimes, but a basic example, like if I boycotted every store that I had a moral qualm with how they manufactured their goods, I'd never buy anything, that type of thing.
Yeah.
On a basic level, but also living my values. Politically, being in law school in this time, wanting to help and do as much as I possibly can, and like trying to figure out how to prioritize in a strategic way according to my values has been extremely difficult.
Yeah, and so if you were to bottom line what some of your values are, I've heard a few themes, right? I think I heard something about justice. I think I heard something about serving other people. Like if you were to bottom line what a few of your core values are, maybe just one, what's one?
Sure. Well, definitely social justice. I'm an activist first and foremost. That's why I'm in law school, but also compassion and patience, I'd say.
Yeah. So social justice, compassion, and patience. It's so important to live our values every single day. We know that, right? There are times where you're an activist. We have to march. We have to make noise. We have to be big and public. And one of the places, Laura, that I'll challenge you, and I suspect it's a question that other people have on their mind here tonight, is what's the smallest way in a moment of overwhelm that you can live that value of, let's say, compassion?
Saying something hopeful or smiling at someone.
Smiling at somebody, saying something helpful, perhaps practicing some compassion towards yourself, right? What could that look like? And so living our values doesn't have to be a big macro exercise, right? Living our values when we're stressed and overwhelmed, I want to encourage you, and we're going to talk more about the power of micro moments in just one moment, but truly thinking about, in a moment of stress and overwhelm, stopping and saying, what is the smallest way I can live my value right here, right now? And saying I'm going to march tomorrow or I'm going to do this tomorrow doesn't count. Doesn't count. It's about finding a way to live it in the moment. Now, smiling at somebody, is that going to take the pressure off studying? No, of course not. Is taking a moment to say something nice going to completely eliminate maybe some of the stress of what's going to be on your finals in a few weeks? No. But the neuroscience tells us that just by taking small moments to realign with something that is important to us can have a monumental and significant impact on how we approach what's in front of us. Anecdotally, in my coaching practice, I see it all of the time, which is if we can take the smallest step forward with our values as the guiding light, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best day ever, 1 being the worst day of my life, maybe we can take it from like a 3 to a 3.25. But it's all about thinking out these micro moments to make incremental changes from surviving to thriving. Does that help? Skeptical? It's okay if you're skeptical.
Yes, that's helpful. It's sounds hard, but yes.
And Laura, I'll give you one more framework that might be helpful, not just for you, but for everyone else. If someone, for example, said integrity is one of their values, which they can live by letting their work speak for themselves. So each one of our values kind of has a shadow side to it. So what I mean by that is each one of our values has this other kind of the other side of the coin to it. So for example, one of your core values was connection. The shadow side of your connection value might be rejection. So if you're finding it hard, oh, Laura, come back. I want to ask you a question. If you're finding it hard to live on the light side, the compassion side of your value, you might be, thinking to yourself, okay, if that feels hard right now, how do I get aware of what's on the shadow side of my value? Let's say, I don't know if Laura's still with us. Let's say on the other side of her compassion value was not caring about other people, apathy. If you're finding it hard to connect to a value that you have in a moment, like, how do I even practice connection here? It can also be value to say, like, well, what would apathy look like here? And you can at least make a conscious decision to not practice apathy or not practice the shadow side, kind of the underbelly, the opposite characteristic of your core value. Yeah? All right, we got a ton of questions in the chat about work-life alignment and taking care of ourselves. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we rethink self-care. I would love to hear from you in the chat. Is this something that you like to do? Is it something you think is woo-woo? Is it something that you typically value but haven't had the time for lately? Where are you today in relation to this idea of self-care? Something I value but haven't had time for. That's probably the most popular response that I get. And regardless of whether you are very passionate about your self-care and it's something you take seriously, or you think that this is kind of woo-woo and you're feeling really skeptical about why you signed up to be here right now, or you're somewhere in the middle, right? Like some of the things that are coming in the chat, like my self-care seems to have disappeared or is non-existent. It's something I'm more self-conscious of. And I love this from Susan. Self what? Susan, I think I might borrow that from you. I will, of course, attribute. You know, one of the things, again, I work with a lot of attorneys, you know, and regardless of typically whether they're an activist or they're working in public interest or for the government, or they're working in a big law firm where the hours requirements can feel crushing no matter how many years you've been there for, one of the most toxic stories that I hear from people in roles like this is that self-care is an indulgence, it's a treat. Not only do I not have time for it every day, it's not even required every single day. And so I really want to encourage you to just reframe the narrative around self-care. And it's so almost funny, almost comical, because if we talked about this, about anything else in the world, it would just make sense. Like, for example, the race car cannot go 200 miles an hour if there is no gas in the tank. Like, if we were to talk about cars, we're like, oh yeah, physics, science, that makes sense, right? Energy is actually scientific. That just makes totally rational sense. And yet when it comes to our own self-care, we give ourselves permission to run on fumes. We often beat ourselves up for why we're not at our best performance when we're running on fumes. And all we end up doing when we're running on fumes for too long is end up somewhere stranded on the side of the road that most certainly was not our desired destination. And so what makes self-care so important when we're thinking about not just surviving or thriving in this world, but is to think about where each and every single one of you is going on your personal leadership journey. And I can tell you, as someone who works with a lot of leaders, one of the things I observe every single day is that the most successful people that I work with are often the most militant about their self-care. So I was just talking to an associate in a big law firm a few weeks ago at this point, and he was sharing with me that August 2020 was his highest billable month ever in the history of his career, and he's about a 7th-year associate. In that month, he also literally woodworked a new desk. Now, literally, don't ask me how he woodworked a new desk. I mean, like, I was really in awe. That is like above and beyond what I normally see. But when I asked him, like, how did you do this? What he said to me was, how could I not do this? He said it was the only thing, just waking up 30 minutes early to literally get messy and get creative was the only thing that helped him deal with the crush of hours and filing deadlines and pressure. And so, you know, you're sitting here probably just listening to me, and maybe you're tempted to take my word for it. Maybe you're still skeptical. I want to share some research that I love out of Harvard Business School by this woman named Dr. Ashley Willen. She's a professor at HBS, and she studies the science of how high performers use their time. And Dr. Willens kind of got tired of going to all of these conferences and chit-chatting with people at the networking receptions and them saying, you know, your keynote was fantastic. You just don't understand how it works at in my industry, at my company, with my particular job. And so she and her colleagues got sick of hearing this over and over again. And so they decided to study a group of professionals whose performance is measured by how they use time to debunk the myth that nobody is too busy for self-care. Who do you think they studied when it came to studying professionals whose performance is measured by how they use time? Everyone guesses lawyers. That's why I was waiting for somebody to say that. I get that all the time when I bring this to firms, when I bring this to groups like this, even when I bring this to non-attorney groups. I was just telling Mary, I did a workshop on this topic for an energy company this afternoon, and every single one of them, we had over 10 people who chimed in lawyers. It's actually not lawyers, though certainly lawyers are measured by how they use time, specifically billable time in many roles. It was call center employees. They looked at call center employees. And what Dr. Willens and the team at Harvard found was that the call center employees who took a 30 to 60 second, what she coined micro moment of self-care in between pickups, did three key things. Number one, it's counterintuitive, but they got through more pickups. So what she and her team determined was that those micro moments of self-care actually positively impacted their performance. Number two, especially for those of you who are working professionals and have clients or have stakeholders, they had the highest client satisfaction scores. So those 30 to 60 seconds, that micro moment of self-care, made a measurable impact on how other people perceive their work and their experience interacting with them. And then lastly, I can think of nothing more important when we talk about thriving. The call center employees who took 30 to 60 second micro moments of self-care also had the highest scores for self-satisfaction. They were the happiest in their jobs. So if you're sitting here thinking that your life is too busy, work is too crazy, finals are approaching, and you can't afford self-care, if you don't believe me, go to the Harvard research. You cannot not afford self-care in this moment. It's kind of like investing in the stock market. It takes just a little bit of an investment up front, but if you pick the right stock, you should be seeing a dividend and return over time. 30 to 60 seconds is all you need, bonus points if you get more. And so as we think about self-care, there are really 4 pillars of self-care. And would love to hear from you, what are some of your favorite self-care activities? I heard someone in the chat before, feel free to just throw it into the chat. I heard someone today, earlier in the chat here, saying that for them, they're taking up knitting. Anyone else have a self-care? Justin said that he's been walking his dog. Anyone else have anything that maybe it's something you love to do, but you haven't had a chance to do it? Maybe it's the one thing that's keeping you sane in what I think we can all universally agree are pretty insane times. Yoga from Martin, painting, walking, exercise, golf. My favorite part of my job, just to bring you under the hood here, I love to see this because I feel like I get my own kind of refreshed list of ideas every single time I do a workshop like this. I love that this came from Kelly, relaxing in an office chair with the radio blasting on a really great song. Listening to music for the sake of listening to music, Kelly, is also one of my self-care go-tos. Painting and reading. Great news. There's no right or wrong. These are all great. I want to walk you through the 4 pillars of self-care because if you're anything like a lot of the people I spend my time, 9 months in, your self-care routine might have gotten stale. The things you used to enjoy doing have kind of either lost their luster in a remote world or like they're just not doing the job anymore. Or maybe you tried to do something like make sourdough 6 months ago and you tried something new, but it didn't really resonate for you. I will never make sourdough. That's just too advanced of a baking maneuver for me, no matter how good the starter is. So let's talk about the 4 pillars of self-care. The first is obviously physical. A picture, of course, of I think the most famous physique in the world, the David in Florence. Most of us, when we think about self-care, we come here. Sleep, water, diet, exercise. These are all important things. Where I want to encourage you in the spirit of leveling up together, to level up your physical self-care is to not just pay attention to your physical self-care, but to also pay attention to the signs your body is sending you as a signal that you need more self-care. So if you are struggling to sleep at night, if you've been gaining weight or losing weight, or your weight's been swinging back and forth, and that's not usual for you, if you've been drinking more alcohol than you did a year ago, I want you to just be attuned to the physical signals your body is sending you. There's no judgment. As one of my teachers says, it's not judgment, it's just awareness, right? And think about your body, whether you're crossing a boundary, whether you're burning out, your body is always going to be the first thing to kind of signal like, hello, warning, warning. And remember, to our race car metaphor, I don't want you to get stuck on the side of the road, stranded away from your destination. So make sure you're paying attention to those signs in your body. I can't underscore enough how important emotional self-care is. That's really just taking care of how you feel inside yourself. So this could be anything from limiting social media and limiting news, to making time to connect with a friend or a family member if you're an extrovert, to having quiet time and alone time if you're an introvert. And this isn't a nice to have. This isn't woo-woo. In 2016, the American Bar Association did the largest study of its kind on attorney well-being. And what they determined in 2016 was that 28% of licensed and employed attorneys had depression. 19% of them had symptoms of anxiety. 21% of them were problem drinkers. So if you're having a hard time managing the stress, it was so powerful for the ABA to put out these statistics, because it's not a referendum on what it means to be a lawyer. It's a call to action to say some of the work you do is the most important work that is happening in our country. It's the most important work that's happening at companies if you're working with clients. And taking care of ourselves has to become a core job responsibility so that we can do the jobs that we're passionate about. That's one of the things that got me so excited about being here today, because as you think about what that emotional self-care can look like, you all have a head start with your wellness initiative. And so I encourage you, I was poking around your wellness blog today, to really lean into those resources. Because no matter how you slice it or dice it, we just can't afford to burn out right now. I saw a horrifying number the other day from CNBC that 70%, or rather 69% of working Americans either currently are or have exhibited signs of burnout in the pandemic. Can't underscore this enough. I'm not saying it to be doom and gloom with you. I'm saying it to normalize it. Our life is really hard right now. If you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling burnt out, you're not a failure. What you do have, however, is a choice to think about what those micro steps are, to really think about how you can thrive moment to moment, or at least get a little further away from surviving. The last two here, intellectual self-care. What do you all think I mean by intellectual self-care? Naps. Shane, naps, one of my favorite self-care activities of all time. Kelly named it. It's giving your brain a break. I think we can all agree, even if you're someone who works well on deadlines, most of us don't get our most powerful strokes of genius, of creativity, of innovation, of aha moments when we're sitting working for the 14th straight hour. We often get that aha moment when we're taking the dog for a walk, when we're getting ready for bed, like washing our face, when we're having that first cup of coffee in the morning, when we're reading a book or listening to a podcast. And so I want to encourage you to think about how intellectual self-care, whether it's taking a break and practicing some kind of mindlessness, or doing something that uses your brain proactively, like music or creating, or someone said painting or knitting. All of these things actually help you do better at work. They're good for your brain, they're good for your body, they're good for feeling good about your life. And then lastly, someone said something just about having a clergy household. Last is spiritual. So maybe some of you guys think this is woo-woo. I give you 4 pillars because you don't need to choose all 4. Maybe for you, you're discovering mindfulness and meditation for the first time. Maybe you're part of an organized religion community, and either that's been something that's been really grounding for you, or it's something that you feel detached from because you can't meet at your church, your mosque, your synagogue anymore, and you're craving that fellowship, or you're craving that kind of community and content. Thinking about how you can cultivate that in your life. So as we look across the 4 pillars of self-care, there tends to be one that we feel the most at home and most uncomfortable in. And I put some examples in here. I'm curious, we've been talking a little bit about self-care. What's a self-care activity that's outside of your usual that you want to commit to doing in harnessing the power of a micro moment? It doesn't have to be a retreat. It doesn't have to be anything that costs money. What's one thing that you're going to do today? Kelly said a puzzle. Limit news, limit social media. Leave a meeting early, such great self-care. 5-minute meditations, Susan, is it Susan or Suzanne? That she put out there. One of my clients oh yeah.
Suzanne,
thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
One of my clients is really loving the 10% Happier app. Saying no to requests. Whoever PMW is, you're ahead of something that we're getting to. Whatever it is, I want to encourage you to make an appointment with yourself, to budget in your self-care time the same way you would a study session, a work meeting, something that you're responsible to in your family and your personal life. The race car can't go 200 miles an hour when the gas tank is empty. It's physics, period. You cannot perform at your best. You can't feel your best when this is not a priority. Which really brings us to this tool around managing and reclaiming time. Can I just get a +1 if every single day feels like a blur for you? It feels that way for me too. I always say to people, I'm a coach. I always joke, I have a few little tips, tricks, and life hacks up my sleeve. But my day feels just as blurry. My week feels just as blurry as each one of you. I love that Justin put in +100. It's like the momentum of every single day literally feels like this, like just a blur. Days become nights, nights become days, weekdays become weekends. And time becomes really oddly elastic. Some moments we feel like we don't have enough. Some moments we're so restless, we wonder and wish if it could ever move faster. And so as you think about reclaiming time, I want to help thinkers about, what it is that we've lost. And when we really boil it down and bottom line it, we've actually lost so many of the rituals and the markers for how we mark time and how we create boundaries accordingly, whether they're boundaries with other people or boundaries with ourselves or boundaries in our work and our lifetime. Because we used to have the smallest little rituals about how we took that first cup of coffee, how we commuted, whether it was walking across campus or I know someone said they're joining us from the Bronx, taking the subway into work. And so as you think about what you can control right now, as you reclaim time, and as you try to make days less blurry, and to recreate some boundaries in your life, I want to encourage you to rethink and get curious about rituals. And if you're thinking like rituals, this is really woo-woo, I'm not going to do anything with crystals or meditations, though power to you if crystals and meditations are your jam. I just have to bring you back to the facts. Like, ladies and gentlemen, this is neuroscience. It is neuroscience that rituals help us. And a ritual can be, I listen to a pump-up song before I sit down to do something hard. I put my computer in a drawer at the end of the day to signify that my dining room table has once again become my dining room table and not my desk. There's a fantastic study at the University of Toronto about like why rituals work for pro athletes. Why are athletes superstitious? And what the researchers found was that practicing small rituals improves our concentration. It creates physical and mental readiness. It boosts our confidence. And when our world also feels really high stakes all the time, it decreases our anxiety around making mistakes. For the students on the phone who are prepping for finals or might even be prepping for what the bar is going to look like, can't think of anything more high stakes than that, right? So just thinking about how practicing small, teeny tiny rituals about how we take our cup of coffee, how we take breaks in our day, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, reclaims time and creates those boundaries, creates those fences in our life when every single other fence has been collapsed or just frankly evaporated. So rituals are great in theory, but how do we build them into our day when every day feels like the same? It feels like Groundhog's Day, and we feel really stressed and busy. Anyone here ever experiment with time blocking on their calendar? How's that gone for you? Anyone like +1 if you don't know this concept? Well, speaking of rituals, and I'm gonna just tell you this before we move on. This is my strawberry smoothie that I have every single day. That's how small rituals can be. Every day I take an afternoon break and have a smoothie. Let's see, Justin said, it helps manage the time expectations of others. We have some people who are like, I'm not exactly sure what time blocking is. Time blocking is the concept where we take our calendar and we actually block proactively how we plan to spend and use each day. So instead of waking up to an empty calendar or a calendar with 1 or 2 meetings on it or 1 or 2 events on it and a long to-do list or an email inbox that feels like it's exploding, we go ahead and we actually block time onto our calendar for what we're going to do from 9 to 10, from 10 to 11, and so on and so forth. So as we think about reclaiming time, creating some boundaries, building ritual into our lives, here are 6 things that you can time block today into your calendar. So the first is, any work time or prep time or wrap up time, it can bring a lot of agency to your day when you have dedicated time blocks to get yourself settled and to close it on off at the end of the day. And how this connects to ritual, I have one client who's really been struggling to turn it off at night. So she just created on her calendar every day at 6 o'clock, she wraps up, and that's on her calendar every single day. She has set expectations internally with her team that she's going to be powering down at that time to caregive to a young daughter. And she has a little ritual that she does. She makes her to-do list for the next day. She closes her computer and puts it in a drawer. That's what it looks like for her about how we link time blocking and ritual. Obviously, when you have meetings or when you have class or study time, agility and flex blocks, which I'm going to come back to in a second. Mealtime. Can I just get a +1 if you have been guilty of eating at your computer during the pandemic more than usual? I don't know about you all. I just saw Lena laugh a little bit. my desk on a bad day, literally I call it, it's a kind bar graveyard. It's like, I know that my life has gone off the rails because I have like 4 kind bar wrappers on my desk. I told you, right, Coach, we're allowed to have bad, crazy days too, where we realize we've gone over our boundary and we need to pull it back. So yeah, I see a lot of +1s for the kind bar graveyard club. Budgeting in your self-care time. And then if you're caregiving, maybe to young children, maybe to elderly family members, maybe to fur babies, any kind of care time. So the biggest point of resistance I get, especially when I work with lawyers who are practicing, whether they're in big law or they're in public interest, is this: Randy, you must not get anything about my work. I thought you worked with lawyers. Every single day I'm a firefighter. It's my job to put out fires. 80% of what I do, it wasn't on my to-do list 4 hours ago. And so I want to say, I do understand your job, right? I understand the kind of high volume, high performance, high stakes, high unpredictability world that many of you live in as practicing attorneys. And even as students that you can experience, especially as you're moving towards high stress milestones like finals or summer internship applications or taking the bar. And that's why I want to encourage you to think about what agility and flex block can bring to your life. So an agility or a flex block is a time you, a block of time you put on your calendar for putting out fires. Now, does this mean that if the fire pops up at 10 and your agility block is at 1, that you can just say to your stakeholders or to like the thing that's really urgent, you know what? I'm gonna take care of you at 1 and parking lot it. No. It's about creating some slack in your calendar, just giving yourself a little bit of a release valve so that when the world does go up on fire, you can reschedule that study session. You can reschedule the time that you set aside to finish the outline. You can reschedule the drafting or the writing that you were gonna do that you had to put on hold for one client because another client needs to get with you on the phone immediately. So it's counterintuitive, but by adding some structure, we actually prime ourselves for agility. Because what happens when we don't build in any of this flex time on our calendar, and our world inevitably goes up in flames and there's a fire, there's no slack. And we end up really stressed and really overwhelmed because we have to make tough decisions about trying to do too much work in too little of a time. And that's where we think about what's important to us in this moment. That's where we think about how we want to live our values, whether it's showing up for our clients or ourselves. And if you take nothing else, I'll take you back to Dr. Willen at Harvard, who said this little truth bomb of a gem. How we spend our time signals everything that we care about in our life. Period. So where are you going to reclaim time? Where are you going to set some boundaries? Where are you going to take control of your calendar? Where are you going to just make some easy rituals for yourself, like your afternoon strawberry smoothie? You can borrow this one from me if you want. Where are you going to create those things in your life to move the dial from surviving, from surviving to thriving? Any questions about this? Comments? Skeptics? You all should watch me bring this into a big law firm. We have really great conversations about it. And then I get a lot of emails and follow-up of people telling me they were courageous enough to try it.
I don't want to take up all the mic time. So if other people want to talk, just go ahead and cut in. But
Laura, go for it.
One thing I was thinking about when you were talking is, like all of it sounds so amazing, and doing it, small steps at a time. It seems manageable, but, time is a privilege. Money is a privilege. Having help, having people to delegate to, all of these things are, really scarce for different people, like at different levels. And it seems like the more like, generally like privileged you are, the easier it is to like make time, to figure out how to make time if that makes sense. So I think it's really also important to take all these things, but like reframe not just the way that we're looking at our own lives to cope with this chaotic world, but to reframe the way that we're running the world. I mean, there's a lot of legal professionals here. We're in, positions of authority in management. And I think, we have a responsibility to start to reframe some of these, work structures and some of these interactions that we have in the way that we live out our lives and we structure our careers so that we can allow and even mandate this type of self-care.
Laura, you make so many great points. And the one that I particularly want to pull out is about privilege. Because when we think about self-care as massages and delegating things to assistants and paying for $8 green juices, yes, that is a privilege. What I feel really bullish on when it comes to this, and even when I bring this to audiences that frankly don't look as privileged as the people who are sitting in this room, who are privileged to go to law school, are privileged to be attorneys or work in this field, is that 30 to 60 seconds is the great equalizer. A micro moment of self-care can be how you read 2 pages in a book of your choice before bed. A micro moment of self-care is taking time to listen to one 3-minute track, one song. And so one of the things I'm very bullish on, right? Self-care, there's a whole industry for people who want to take $40 a piece boutique fitness classes, or people who want to drop into vacation spa days and they can't go to their, normal Hamptons retreat. I'm really, really bullish that thriving by taking micro moments is an equalizer. And so I'm so glad that you hit this, because even deputizing and delegating, we all still have peers. And so it doesn't mean we're sending it to someone who works for us as like a housekeeper or someone in our office, but like, what can you just lean on a friend for support? And so I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to clarify that and flesh that out, because it's such an important point, and this is accessible to all of us. Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that you actually shared, and keep sharing. Your contributions are super valuable. So thank you so much. Any other questions or thoughts on this? Welcome thoughts. I really enjoyed that comment from Laura, truly. And for the record, Laura, there was no green juice in here. This was a Costco jar of tomato sauce.
Oh, I'm definitely privileged in all kinds of ways. I just signed up to take aerial yoga classes that I cannot afford. So definitely feel you there. But I was gonna ask, I know I only briefly looked at your website, so I didn't get a chance to look through all the things that you do, but I was wondering if I'm curious if you have different types of trainings for like management spaces or people to train either the larger public or a larger group or a company to do this, and if you have trainings like that.
I do, and I'm really passionate about having conversations with all organizations about how they can do the 3 things we're talking about here tonight, which is lead on purpose, navigate transitions, and level up. So with your permission, I would love to sidebar that, and we can either save it for the Q&A, or you and I can follow up more specifically, because I'm excited about how excited you are about what legal leaders have the potential to do moving forward.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that with you more later on.
Awesome. So here's the thing. This is what separates, I would say, coaching from a great conversation. And what you're experiencing here tonight, which is, this isn't just a great conversation. We are going to pair all the concepts that we've talked about with an actual plan. Again, this is just how the rest of the world works. You can't win the Super Bowl if you don't make a plan, a game plan of the plays you're going to run and try them and practice them and get sacked a few times and then eventually run a few touchdowns down the field, right? So when we talk about how we can thrive in our life, It's counterintuitive, but I actually want to challenge you to segment each one of these out, right? So instead of saying about how am I going to thrive in my life, I want you to start thinking about what does my professional life look like? Students, I consider your academics to be your profession. What does my personal life look like? And what does my family and relationships life look like? A lot of times we lump family and relationships in with personal. I want you to disentangle them for this exercise. A lot of times we loop our personal life into our professional life. I want you to disentangle those. And I encourage you to do this exercise weekly. Some of my clients do it on Sunday nights, some on Monday mornings, some on Fridays as they're wrapping up their week. To go through this exercise. In each category, what are my top 1 to 2 needs? 1 to 2 needs. In each one of these categories. So, what do I absolutely need to do this week at work or at school? What is an absolute personal need for me? And what is a need I have in my family and my relationships? But needs are where we survive. And I don't want you leaving here just hanging on for dear life tonight. I want to challenge you to get aspirational. Getting aspirational, living in the world of could, of potential is something that helps us thrive. What's the goal that you have for yourself? So, like Laura said, like maybe a goal for herself is like she's gonna do a really out-of-the-box self-care activity that feels like an indulgence for her. She's gonna do aerial yoga. Her goal is to sign up for aerial yoga. Maybe your goal in your family and your relationships category is like you have that friend who you haven't talked to through the whole pandemic and you haven't reached out to them because you're just too busy. Maybe a goal is to reach out to that friend. For the working parents, you might hear my 2-year-old crying in the background. Maybe your goal is to do something in your family relationships that's outside of your caregiving responsibilities. I want to encourage you to also think about where you're going to say yes to things in your life this week. So I'm going to say yes to time blocking, maybe at work. I'm going to say yes to trying to power down my screen time and put my phone away after 10 o'clock so that I'm not on Facebook at midnight. I'm going to say yes to having a conversation with somebody in my personal life who I really adore. Or maybe it's about where you're going to say no. So how do you create a boundary and say no? What are you going to say no to at work? What are you going to say no to in your personal life? And what are you going to say no to in your family and your relationships life? So maybe you have that person in your life, a friend, a family member, and you just can't read one more of their election posts on Facebook. Or you can't take that phone call from them because it's just too dang draining. And so you're not going to take that time. What we're going to do now is take 5 minutes. Lima is going to put this game plan in your hands. And we're going to take 5 minutes for you to just jot down some initial thoughts. While we're doing that, I want you to start putting your questions in the chat, because when we come back from that exercise, we're going to address Q&A. For those of you who are joining on the recording, we're going to truncate the Q&A for you, but you'll at least get some of it. So if you haven't downloaded that, do download it, and please start putting any questions you might have in the chat, or if you would like us to call on you. I think, Laura, you said you have at least one more question for us. If you want us to call on you, you can either prepare to unmute, or you can go ahead and just let me know that you want to be called on verbally. And again, that document is in the chat. No time like the present to start thinking about what your actual needs are and your actual goals are. What you're going to say yes to, what you're going to say no to. Something I said no to this week is folding laundry. So here's the good news. You're going to have this document in 10 minutes when we're done. I'm going to be sharing a takeaways document with you, or rather Mary and Lima will share a document with you that I shared with them. And just to review where we've gone in the last hour and 20 minutes, we looked at frameworks for decision-making when we're stressed and overwhelmed. We've talked about tools for how to actually move the dial through ways we can reclaim time, reestablish boundaries, and manage our self-care through just micro moments. And we've also looked at a blueprint for designing your own Thriving remote game plan. Anyone brave enough to share something that was on their game plan? A need, a goal, something they're going to say yes to, something they're going to say no to. It's really personal, so you don't have to share if you don't want to. One thing I might encourage for those of you who are practicing attorneys who work, this is an exercise I come in and do with teams all the time, and it can be really powerful to do this with your office or do this with your team. And if you have questions about how to do that in a way that's appropriate, just shoot me an email after this. Regardless of whether you're practicing or you're a student or you're somewhere in between, I encourage you to find an accountability partner. Who's someone who you can check in with every single week to see how you're doing with this plan? Come back to it week after week. Guarantee you, because you're human, you're not going to hit every single thing on that plan every week. In fact, I'll challenge you if you do, your goals weren't stretchy enough for the week. So really think about how you can play big there. But also make it something that does feel reasonably attainable. I want to leave you with just one final thought. If you took nothing away from today, nothing away from tonight, I just want to leave you with those call center employees. Every single day, every single minute, we have a micro opportunity to take 30 to 60 seconds to focus on the things we can control, to recalibrate our boundaries, to demarcate time, to put the computer away, to go take a walk, to practice self-care, to show up for ourselves, to show up for different people. Think of this as a 30 to 60 second exercise and you will start thriving. Think of it as something that you need to have figured out so that you can live it 100% of the time. And you're just set up for failure because one bad day will crush you. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Q&A. I'm going to leave my contact information up here for just 1 second. If you have a question you're too shy to ask me now in the Q&A, throw it in an email to me. If you want to keep up with something major free content, sign up for my newsletter. Check out my Insight Center. Mary and Lima are going to be sharing some articles I have for some of the things we talked about today. If you want to share 4 weeks from now, 4 months from now, something that happened on your plans, I'd love to hear from you. So we're going to take some time now for Q&A, but I really sincerely mean it when I say stay in touch with me. I want to continue the conversation with you all. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to you to see if you have any questions. Laura, I'm not sure if you're still with us. I think you had another question besides the management question, unless I misheard you before.
Oh, I mean, I always have lots of questions, but I actually have an idea that's probably too much and would involve too many questions to be appropriate right now. There's something like an idea of a way to engage like the legal community around these efforts in like a different way alongside a lot of the stuff the ABA is doing right now.
So if you could just bottom line it, like one sentence, what feels resonant now that didn't 90 minutes ago?
Well, the idea I have is to set up some kind of like tracking check-in system with law school administrators, like through the ABA and COLAP, that they would the kind of like way that we're supposed to be checking in with ourselves, kind of macro that out to kind of track some of this data over time, because like having the data that like wellness works is like so important for people to believe it. So developing that and like utilizing existing conferences and the wellness movement that exists. I just realized that that's a missing piece.
So where I'm going to connect the dots between this great idea and what thriving can look like, put it as a goal for yourself for the week to do a little bit of brainstorming about this, or put it in your say yes to, I'm going to say yes to brainstorming about this. When it comes to the data itself in these documents, I think Lima already shared it here. You know, there's Harvard research in there, there's ABA research in there. So there's lots of great research on this topic, and some of the other articles that we've shared with you as well from Something Major and other publications also link to more and more and more research. So yeah, definitely just keep thinking about this stuff, because every single day, every thought, every action, every word that we have, we underestimate how much power we have to move that dial for ourselves. Does it mean we can wake up on a cruddy day and say, like, I'm going to make it all better without either being totally disingenuous or, you know, just lying to ourselves? No. But when we start to think about small ways to make big impacts, we can remember that each one of us has choices we make on our calendar and what we say yes to and what we say no to. And I really encourage you all to think about what's important, what boundaries look like in your life, because you all are the established and emerging legal minds of our country, and we can't afford to have you burn out. You know, you're no use as an activist if you're burnt out a decade from now.